meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jami Kaeb, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you're going to hear from men and women who've experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers or foster parents, or other people who are here to bring you hope and encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share with a friend. Remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Well, Annie, it really is a privilege to talk with you today. I want to start off our time together by reading something you wrote, and then we're going to dive right into your story, okay? So you wrote this: with a name like Annie, I'm sure you can imagine that the most common nickname I heard growing up was Little Orphan Annie. The thing is, though, that was truly who I was for many years of my life, an orphan, a girl growing up without a mother to hold and a father to protect me. A teenager who was torn down and living in fear because of all that had happened behind closed doors. A very confused young girl who begged God to set me free from the life of pain I was living in, but was threatened to stay silent about. I was the little orphan Annie who'd watch that movie and not care for the mansion, but dreamed of the loving family who'd save me from my home. I wanted her happy ending. For so long, I was afraid to share my story. I spent years protecting everyone but me. But now I know more than ever that my life is a tapestry that God has been weaving with redemption, restoration, and healing. He tells his story through mine. Annie, first of all, thank you so much for your willingness to share your story with us. Will you start by just sharing more about your childhood? Like, what was it like growing up in your home?
Yes, definitely. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor. So I grew up in a home with my birth mother and father, and then a biological brother that was a year older than me. We grew up, in a home. Probably from the outside, it looked like just a normal unit in a suburb outside of Portland, Oregon. And oftentimes people ask me, like, when did it all start? When did the abuse start? But I truly can't remember the year, I guess. All I know is that by the time I was in middle school, like sixth grade, wanting to end my life was something that was a common, like an everyday thing. I had such fear of waking up to go to school, wondering if I'd even make it to school, wondering how I would be able to fake it at school. And so, by the time I was in middle school is when things were just constantly on the day to day. So fearful. I would say just about every form of abuse was prevalent in my home. And it was on a very, very regular occurrence.
Man, that's a lot. And you mentioned in there at school, I wanted to fake it. And that's what you said. You said before in a blog post you'd written, you'd seem so happy. You were popular. You were a successful student. Likely no one had a clue what was going on behind those doors. How did you keep up this act at school?
It's so wild to look back now because I don't know what it was within me. I think that it was just, I just think that maybe it was imagination. Like I thought, maybe at that young age, I thought in order to survive, if I could create this almost this false persona at school for these hours of the day, it became like a reality. And so for my friends, they never knew what was going on. I wasn't allowed to hang out with people, so they never got to experience my world or even the people in it. And I remember for, most classes you'll do like, let's talk about our family, let's talk about our parents. I mean, I would completely just make stuff up because I would want to say to myself, I thought this was my opportunity to create what I wanted. And none of these people could question it because they wouldn't think I was lying. And I really think that is what kept me surviving for a long time, because I thought when I'm at school, I'm the person that I wish I could be. I'm the person who has caring parents. I'm the person who has, a home where they can ask for help with homework, where they can talk with their moms about boys, like where they have people who come to their sports games and all that. And so when I look back now, it's so crazy to think I was able to keep that up. But I'm also so thankful that I somehow had I don't know what it was, but it's like I had the ability to know that this is how I need to survive almost.
Yeah. Do you feel like, was there anyone who questioned you, or who kind of felt maybe something was not adding up for you? Like any
Um,
teachers or anything?
yeah, later on, I don't know that in middle school if that was a concern. I was never vocalized. I mean, definitely once I started, and how I ended up even getting safe and going to youth group is like a whole nother God story in itself. But once I did start, going to youth group, my youth pastor I know she would ask me questions all the time about it. Like what's happening at home. And then in high school also, I had a few teachers who I didn't know questioned anything, but they ended up being the reason why I got called into the office in DHS coming into my story.
Okay. Wow. Well, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Um, you mentioned this sixth grade almost daily wanting to end your life and feeling that hopelessness. And first of all, I am so sorry for that. That is such heavy. I mean, the past that you've had to walk through is so heavy. And I think it's just a remarkable thing that you're here and able to share. I mean, that speaks to the hope of God, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
just,
Yeah.
there's nothing else, right? That you could be here in this place of being able to share such deep pain.
Absolutely. Yes. It's definitely all him.
Yeah, which is awesome. Well, let me ask this question. So you were feeling buried by this sense of hopelessness. You described it this way. You said, I sent a text to my youth pastor asking her to meet me at school so I could just see her and say hello. Little did she know that it was goodbye I actually planned to say. What happened next?
So it's so wild. I remember that night like it was yesterday. It's the night that after years and years of begging, of praying, of, sometimes finding a glimpse of hope that, maybe tomorrow will be the day something changes. But knowing that I was threatened to silence so that I didn't have control on whether or not I was going to get free, I was tired of waiting it out. I'd become really, really bitter at God and thought, if you really cared about me, why would you let this keep happening? And so that night, I decided tomorrow is going to be my last day at school. It's going to be my last day living. I had reached this point of where I contemplated suicide so much, but I didn't. I thought of the people who were in my circle who did support me, and I couldn't. It was always this like balancing act of like, I don't want them to be hurt and feel like they could have done more, but at the same time, I reached a point where I could not do it anymore, and where I knew that if I wasn't in control of ending my own life, then my birth parents were going to be the ones to do it. And I did not want to let them have that power. And so I texted my youth pastor. I said, hey, can you come meet me at school tomorrow before class? I just want to see you. And at that point, I had been banned from like going out at all. So I wasn't able to go to church. So I hadn't seen her in a while. And so to her, it was normal. Like, oh, this is how we sneak around so Annie can see me. So she came to my school that next morning, and I remember one of her boys was in the car. And so they were so excited to see me. And she just said, we're so happy to see you. Like, what's going on? Like, how are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm great. I just I wish I could come back to youth group, but one day. And I just said, I just want you to know, like, I love you guys. And I'm just so thankful for the life that you've brought into my world and just for being there and just being so consistent. And just really, I just wanted to thank her. But I was trying to think of how can I say this so that she didn't suspect anything.
Wow.
And so, I gave her and her boy a hug, and then they left. And, she's like, we love you. Hope to see you soon. Well, I went into school that day, and my second to last class was some sort of social studies class. I can't remember which one specifically. And I was doing my work, and my teacher gets a phone call and then says, Annie, your counselor wants to see you. And I had only ever seen my counselor about college application thing. So I kind of thought to myself, oh, I thought we already talked a lot about that. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And, of course, all the students are like making sounds. They're like, oh, you're in trouble. Just because you don't usually get pulled out of class to go talk about college. Like usually that's designated times. And so I didn't think anything of it. I was like, this is kind of weird. I hope that like nothing bad happened. So I went into her office, and I just remember I walked in. I barely ever met with her. It was really about school. And as soon as I walked into her, she said, I need you to sit down. I said, okay. And that kind of scared me. And then she closed the door and she said, Annie, what's going on at home? And I remember that was like the first thing she said to me. And it's almost like I never expected in 1,000 years she would ask me that. I was instantly flooded with fear, and then also maybe like a tiny ounce of hope that, oh, maybe this is my chance. But I think more than anything, I was fearful because I had years and years of words of threats, like if you ever tell or anything. And so I thought to myself, like, how am I going to answer this? And I said, what do you mean? Because I really needed to buy time. And she said, I have gotten multiple reports from the community and from your teachers. And I said, about what? And she said, they have suspicion that there's abuse going on at home. And it's just like hearing that word coming out of my counselor's mouth. I remember it's literally like you could hear a pin drop because my whole body just shut down. It was like I dreamt of this moment my whole life, but now that it's here, how does it play out?
Yeah.
And I said to her, oh, and for some reason, I was so able to be quick to think. I actually lied to her and said, oh, it's because actually a friend of mine, that's been going on in her house. And so I must have been acting in a way that made it seem like it was mine. And I think for years I was convinced, I'm like, oh man, maybe maybe I was really convincing and she believed me. But I think looking back now, she probably knew. And I'm really thankful that she didn't question me because she completely said, oh, okay, if this is about your friend. And I said, yes. I said, am I able to trust you to tell you with everything that's going on with my friend? Because she had let me know that she already had a conversation with DHS, and that's when they called me in. And so she was like, they're waiting for us to call them back, and we need to tell them what's happening with what we thought was you, but apparently is your friend. And so, she really just wanted to see if I was open to sharing with her. And I said, I'm open to sharing with you only if they can tell us, like with the information I give them, what they can do for this person. Because to me, it was high risk. And so I thought, if I'm just telling you just to tell you, I'm not I don't know what you're going to do with it. But if there's a chance I can find out I remember specifically saying, can my friend get free from her home?
Oh,
And
my
so
goodness.
she called DHS. I told them everything that was happening with me, but really I said, oh, a friend of mine, this is going on, explained it. And then they said, DHS they didn't know that it was about me, but they said, oh, because you're a secondary reporter, you're not reporting for yourself. We need to kind of explore what our options are, because we can't, they just explained we can't send police there to knock on the door because you're all the legal things. And so they said, okay, Annie, what we need you to do is you're going to come to school tomorrow. And when you get here tomorrow, you're going to come into your counselor's office and we are going to tell you what we can do. But for me, I wasn't planning on coming to school tomorrow. And so it was crazy that happened. First of all, I did not ever think I'd be called into the office for that. But second of all, I thought, this ruins my plans of what I thought was going to happen. And so, I said, okay, I've always been praying to God about, I just need you to do something miraculous to change my circumstance. And so I said to myself, okay, one more day, because if tomorrow I come and they can't do anything, then I'll do it. But I was like, I can hold on for one more day. And the crazy thing is, this whole thing is a God story, my whole life, but even specifically how I ended up in foster care, it's just, there's nothing that I could have done, because I walked home from school that day thinking, get through the night, go to school tomorrow, go to Mrs. Phillips' office, and then I'll get answers of whether or not it's worth living. And so I walked home, walked into my house, and it's kind of a long story, but random, not super random. An altercation happened because there was I think I left my laptop on something small that always caused a reason in my birth mom's eyes for abuse. And she ended up, she was standing by the couch and called me over to the couch. And I went over there because up to this point, I was, a teenager. I had never fought back. I've never even defended myself. I was so fearful and so submissive to this point. But I walked over because she asked me to come over. And then she was standing kind of on the couch and jumped off and grabbed me and pulled me to the ground. And I was in a chokehold. And I would say up to that point, that was probably the first time that I really thought in the moment, I think I'm going to die, because I could not breathe. I started to, my vision started to go black. And I had never fought or defended myself, but I thought to myself, I'm not going to let this be the way I die. So I swung her off of me, and there was earrings on the ground that she grabbed. They were metal earrings, and she swung towards my face and cut right under my eye right here. at that point, I didn't know that. I just felt like pressure to my eye. So I figured that I probably had a black eye, but she, said, get out of my house. And so I ran out of the house I just had a hoodie on and jeans, and my phone. And I was running through my neighborhood. I was going to actually run to my youth pastor's house. But on my way, when I started running just down the street, she pulled up, my birth mom pulled up the car, and I ran into someone's yard because she literally was trying to hit me.
Oh my goodness.
And I started trying to call a friend, and she's like, give me your phone, give me your phone. So I threw my phone at the car and I just ran. And I ran to my youth pastor's house. She wasn't home. And this whole time it's like pouring down rain. It's freezing cold and it's like nighttime. So my vision is like super blurred. My head is throbbing. I'm so cold. As I'm walking back from my youth pastor's house, which luckily she lived like maybe 3 miles from me. So like I did have to walk kind of far, but at least I had somewhere like knew where someone lived. Yeah. And so on my way back, I saw an Albertsons, which is a grocery store, kind of like a Kroger. Walked in there. I have to ask a stranger to borrow money because I had no money on me. And as I walked in, I was at the entrance. Walking out was a neighbor of mine who was a very close friend who I had gone to youth group with. And she looked at me and she just goes, oh my gosh. And I was like, what? And she's like, your eye is bleeding. And I actually did not know that. And because it must have just dried fast, the blood. I was in so much pain. I didn't know what was happening. And I told her, she said, what happened? And I said, oh, Jessica, like I actually tripped. I went on a run and I tripped. And she's like, why would you go on a run in jeans? And I was like, oh, just like spur of the moment, just wanted to get adrenaline out. And then it's so crazy because this is a girl I spent a lot of time with and she never said anything. But right in that entrance, she looked at me and she said, I need you to get in the car with me. You can't try to lie to me. She's like, I know that you're being abused. And I remember also just being like it was so crazy to me. I was like, what? And she's like, get in my car. I'll let you use my phone. And then we got in her car and she told me, the wild thing is like, she actually had stopped going to church for like probably half a year. But she told me, she was like, this is the third time I've been with someone when they've had to call to report abuse. And she's like, when I saw you, I knew that it was God saying that. And even she admitted, she's like, I haven't been to church in like half a year, but she's like, I can't deny it when I know it's God. And so I couldn't even lie about it because she knew like in that moment. And she told me she'd always wondered, but in that moment it became so real to her. So we called our youth pastor, then youth leader, ended up coming. And then, wild. That's how I was placed into foster care.
Oh my goodness. So there's so much here. First of all, you've mentioned a couple times, and even what I read from your own words in the beginning, talk more about you said you were threatened to silence. I mean, and that was an over and over occurrence. Would that be after basically every instance of abuse, or what was that like?
It wasn't after every instance because I think that it got to the point where they just knew I wouldn't say anything. What that looked like was definitely brainwash. There would be moments where they would just say like, it wasn't even me saying like, oh, I'm going to tell my teachers. It would be like my birth mom saying, okay, like now that this happened, let's get in my car. Let's go to the police. Let's go to the police station. Or she'd say, let's go drive to the school and tell them what I did.
Oh,
and to me, it's really odd because like on the outside, it would seem like, well, why wouldn't you just do that? I mean, it would seem like that's weird, but like, why wouldn't you just be like, yeah, but it's like, as a kid who you grow up learning, you have to be loyal to your parents and you like, it's like, I ended up growing up defending them versus them defending me. And so when she would say that, I would go berserk and be like, start crying. I'd be like, no, no, no. Like, I would just absolutely be like, no, no, no. Like, and then they'd be like, okay. And then just go back to normal. And so it was like this constant testing. And so that's really, then there was moments when they would say like, if your school ever calls, if your teachers find out, like, we'll kill you. And so it's like, they didn't even need to say it that much because I was already so fearful on a daily basis that it was just like a given. And then I feel like maybe in moments where they wanted to test me is when she would just say like, okay, let's go now. Like, let's go to the court and let's show them what I just did to you.
Oh, that's so awful. Why do you think that, well, as you were running, here's another question that from what you had just said, but when your mom is literally like chasing you in her car, once you threw that phone, were you able to kind of run in a different place that she couldn't get to you, or was she still like, did she know you were in the Albertsons, or had you'd gotten away from her at that point? Had she given up, or how did that look?
I know that I threw the phone like through the window. Like I said, the window was down into the car,
Okay.
and I was in someone's yard at that point. I mean, I know that cars are faster than people, but I just ran super fast. And I know
Mm-hmm.
at one point she was following me, but I remember at one point because of the stoplights and stuff like that, I like
Yeah,
wove through neighborhoods and stuff like
sure.
that. Um, and I didn't. I remember the whole time being scared she was going to pull in the parking lot because it wasn't. It was maybe like a 5 minute drive from the house,
Okay.
but she was not there. And I know she was at home once
Mm.
everything happened because after the scene of the crime where I was at, so once I was at the Albertsons, the
Mm-hmm.
cops came and the firefighter came. They had told me that they were going to head to the house to arrest her, and so they were
Okay.
able to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Another question I had as you were sharing, but what do you think? What do you think caused you to lie to your friend? Was that just like a habit? Was it like fear that your mom would find out, or what do you think caused that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you would think at that point that I could just be honest because of the series of events, but just for so
Sure.
many years of just trying to defend, and I also knew like I wasn't sure that any of it was a given that I'd get out, and so
Mm-hmm.
to me the risk was too big because it's like, what if I tell her the truth, but then I end
Yeah.
up having to stay in that home? I just knew I wouldn't be able to survive that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, while you were waiting in that parking lot, you were realizing, right, that this dream you had been wishing for, this escape,
Hmm.
was here, and yet it was, like you said, you weren't sure if it was really going to happen or not. And so you
Yeah.
felt like terrified, right? And yet, like, hope probably. I mean, how did it feel as you're waiting there for after the call had been made and you knew someone was coming, but you still weren't really sure what that was going to mean for you?
I remember it being like so much adrenaline all at one time. It's also was hard to focus on just how I felt because I was standing there and then, here comes a policeman who was
Yeah.
honestly he was pretty emotionless, and so he was just like, stand there, I need to take pictures of you. So I'm standing in a parking lot right down the street from my school where lots of my peers probably were, and I was just outside, he's taking pictures of my eye, asking me
Hmm.
to turn around and do things. I'm just like in a public space. So it was humiliating at that point. It was also just very awkward. I was really scared, and I did feel like, okay, maybe this is more hope that they're not going to let me go home. But I feel like the whole time still, though, I was questioning, is my birth
Yeah.
mom going to pull
Of
up? Am
course.
I going to see a classmate? Like, I just had 1,000 questions. Like, where am I going to go tonight? And so,
Right.
yeah, it was hard to focus on just one emotion, but I was very overwhelmed. And I remember even saying to the police officer, like, I actually said, like, I just want to go. I just want to leave. I don't want to be here. Like, it just was too much. And
Yeah.
he told me, he's like, everything you're feeling this is always how the kids feel. Like, they always feel like this. And so that actually helped me because it affirmed, like, I didn't know how to feel in that moment.
I'm sure. Yeah. So where did you go that night?
So I was supposed to, the cop said I was, he's like, you're going to be going to a girls' shelter tonight. But then because my youth pastor pulled up, she asked him, is there any way that Annie can come home with us? And he said, are you guys certified foster parents? And she said, no. And so he's like, the state won't allow that. You guys could get certified and she could be placed with you, but you can't take her home tonight. And I remember my youth pastor saying, can you please just ask? And so he said, I'll try, but it's not going to happen. And he went to call the state. And as he was calling them, she was actually praying like that God would somehow make a way. And I just remember his face because he was just like, he was an older gentleman, very emotionless. But he came back to her and he's like, well, something must have happened because he said, this has never happened. They said you can take her home for one night. And it was like, it was so wild that was even allowed. So I was able to go home with them, which is so, like, I feel so lucky that I was able to be with people I knew, especially that first night because
Yeah.
that's not common at all.
And then how long did you end up staying there? Was it just that night?
They ended up getting emergency certified, and I ended up staying with them for, I want to say 4 years, maybe
Okay.
3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And then I think one of those years I was in college, so my stuff was at their house. But yeah,
Yes. And yeah, because how old were you when this night happened?
So I had just turned 17.
Okay. Wow. So for 4 years, you're in a very safe home, I assume, right?
It was,
Maybe
I
I
mean, to
shouldn't
be,
assume.
no, I'm like, I'll be completely vulnerable. It was safe physically, emotionally. There was a lot of stuff that ended up happening that was not great. That yeah, I guess I just more recently am sharing because it's the hard line between like I'm super appreciative of being in a safe place, but on this side now, like doing work in the foster care realm and like learning about stuff, it's like being trauma informed, seeing how important that is when you have a child who's gone through adverse experiences in your home. That was not something that they had gone through because they were emergency certified, and so that
Sure.
led to a lot of difficulty. And I would say it definitely not intentional, but it was like unintentional damage that was done further. But it was physically safe, and I mean, there were definitely a lot of good things. Like I loved going to church, I loved going to youth group, and I was able to do that freely. But I would say, yeah, there were things that definitely were not ideal.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point is when they didn't have the education to
Yeah.
understand. And so the way you're reacting and responding to things that are coming from trauma, they might be trying to parent in a normal way, which can be a lot more hurtful because you didn't need discipline necessarily. You needed understanding, for
Yes.
example. So that's interesting because my question was going to be there's this thing that we talk a lot about here, and I'm sure you've heard it because you talk about it with trauma informed, but a difference between being physically safe and feeling safe. It sounds
Yes.
like you were physically safe, but
Yes.
maybe didn't necessarily feel completely emotionally safe.
Yeah.
So
100%.
and in that time, how did you navigate that? What did that look like for you? Did you, or like you said just now, maybe you're starting to understand it even more?
Yeah, I would say for sure. Now that like being removed from that environment is I'm able to see more of why or how things were like truly happen or how they really were. Where when you're in it, to me, it's probably like anywhere would have felt better than where I was. And so I didn't have that understanding because I just thought, no one was going to come hurt me physically. And so that was already a sigh of relief. And there definitely wasn't like abuse in any form. It was more just like me not knowing. I didn't know what my trauma was going to do to my behavior. I was never
Yeah.
aware because that was just my life. Like I was 1,000% in survival mode. And so I guess to me, there was a lot of things in hindsight that it's like, as an adult who's parenting or who's, parenting because the state trusts you to do it, parenting a kid who's gone through trauma, it's like how you react to them and their behavior speaks so loudly to who they are as an individual, and it helps develop who they are. So like to me, in moments, I mean, I was extremely emotional. Like every reaction was emotion because I mean, I just been tossed. I mean, in honesty, like tossed around like a rag doll. And so to me, it's like the smallest thing would set me off. I would just cry. I would think, this is why no one will ever love me. I mean, not only was I told these things constantly in my home growing up, but it's like when I look back at my track record, that's all I could see. And so the littlest of things would just make me cry. And so I remember like my foster mom at one point, it just was to her, she had littles, but she didn't have a teenager. And so to her, it was a lot. And she would just say, this is too much. Like, you're too much. And then instead of when she, out of good intention, would want to like correct me or help guide me, whenever I would react emotionally, she would just say, never mind, I'll never talk about this again. And then she would just like close the door. And to me, that spoke to me that, first of all, I'm too much. And then second of all, people just want to give up on me. And
Yeah.
because I'm too much and they can't handle it and I'm too emotional. And so it's like, instead of like learning how to regulate these emotions, I projected all of these words onto myself and it became my identity. And I tried to, for years after that, I tried to be as little as I could to take up as little space as possible. And I felt like a burden 100% of the time because of that.
Wow. Yeah, that too much that can be a big trigger for a lot of us. Yeah. How did your view of God develop or grow during this season?
I definitely saw, just even with me entering into foster care, which I never thought I would get out of my home. And so I saw the hand of justice that God has, and that the way that he brings about, yeah, justice for the oppressed, because I couldn't have imagined how that was going to happen. But even when I thought God had forgotten me, he like reached down and took me out of, in the darkest moments. And then even in the home, even though like, of course, no one's perfect. And so it wasn't a perfect living situation. I did see how I feel like I saw God a lot through the people who surrounded me. Like my church family truly raised me. And I got to see like the father heart of God, whose heart is always for family, regardless of what that looks like. It's like I had people surrounding me. I was able to pursue like passions and to just be myself. And so I also, yeah, I remember just the freedom to get to even go to church and just be with people and just worship and join the worship team and do all these things. God felt so close, because to me, I knew, and even to this day, there's not a moment that goes by. Like I know I 1,000% would not be like talking to you, like living, breathing, if it wasn't for him. It's not like I grew up learning about him. It's like I
Yeah.
literally had like a face-to-face encounter, and now it's forever has marked my life.
That's awesome. And he doesn't think you're too much. In fact, he created you to be fully yourself and fully who he created you to be. And that's a beautiful thing. Okay, so eventually you did age out of foster care. How old were you? Because I know that in some states it's different. So how old were you when you aged out of foster care?
So like the technical legally aging out was 18.
Okay.
And then I did not have any resources, anything at that point, and was going to go to college. I had gotten a full ride scholarship on an art scholarship to a private university, which was like a huge, huge deal. And so I knew I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't sign myself back into voluntary foster care. So it's just like the extended foster care program.
Okay, sure. Mm-hmm.
So I was
Yeah.
in that till I was 20, maybe 22, 21 or 22.
Okay. Okay, yeah. You wrote, so around 21, 22, somewhere around there, you wrote this in one of your articles. You said, "My dream of having a forever family didn't come to an end just because my time in foster care did. I lost hope that I'd be adopted because I had aged out of the system, and I did all I could to put that dream to rest." So it's like you made it out of survival, right? I mean, you were literally in the survival of your life growing up. You got into a home where you felt physically safe, but you still had that desire to belong to somebody, right? The desire for
Yes.
family. Talk about the couple who came into your life back in 2012.
So I was living, my foster family, they were youth pastors. And so at that church that I attended with them, that the church that really raised me, we in 2012 got a new set of worship pastors. And I remember when they first came, my foster mom saying like, "Hey, I need you to, on Sundays, our new worship pastors are going to be here. Like, you should definitely introduce yourself to them. They're like so awesome. They're so fun, blah, blah, blah." Cause she had already met them. And I remember saying at that point, anyone older than me, I did not trust. And I remember saying to her, why would I want to meet people and get close to them and just to have them walk away? Because that was my experience with so many people. And of course, people naturally move on in life. But to me, it felt different whenever that would
Sure.
happen. Just like a lot of abandonment, because I would get so bonded with people. And so I remember her just being like, "Well, they're going to be at our church, so you're going to have to meet them eventually." And so, of course, I met them. And it's crazy because my mom now, she still remembers the day that I met them. And like, she wrote a card to me, like for one of my birthdays, where she said, like she just remembers everything about like what I was wearing, how I would barely look up at them. I couldn't make eye contact for years of my life. I would say it's probably in the past 2 to 3 years that I can look people
Wow.
in the eyes. I could not at all. She said she remembers me looking at her and her just like feeling like there was like a big destiny like over my life. And she's like, little did I know that it would be something that like had to do with all of us connected as a
Wow.
family. But yeah, I met them, over time. Like we definitely did a lot of stuff together because they were really good friends with my foster parents. And so they'd come over and like, we'd do meals, all that stuff. And then there was one year that I think it was actually that spring in 2012 that my foster parents were going on a missions trip to India. And so I needed somewhere to stay. And so I asked if I could stay with the worship pastors, and they said, "Yeah, of course." And I didn't know them. I mean, I knew them, but I was also just a guarded person. So I wouldn't say
Sure.
like was super close or anything. And to me, I always thought, oh, these are my foster parents' friends more, just
Yeah.
because I didn't ever think adults would take interest in me, just because of my past. So I stayed with them, and I remember just the first night staying with them, I was going to bed, and then they came to say like, do you need anything? And I remember just opening up to them, like, I mean, in a way that I never opened up to anyone before, just that first night even. And I remember like crying in a good way after they left my room, because I remember like, yeah, I just thought, wow, God, like, I didn't think I could ever open up to adults like this. And I don't know why or how this happened. They just came to say goodnight. And like, I just let all my walls down, and just like, I felt this, like, it's like this hole in my heart was so filled, even just that first night, thinking like, these are special people that I can trust, because I wouldn't have naturally just done that. It's like,
Yeah.
not with anyone. And so over time, our relationship just like, it just grew so much. I ended up living with them for a little bit. And as things with me and my foster family started to become unraveled, my foster dad actually didn't talk to me for like 3 of the years that I lived with them, just like due to his own personal reasons. And so that left me really broken and caused a lot of damage in me. And yeah, this couple just, they were my family, and they were still friends with my foster parents, but they brought so much healing into my life, and ended up moving to Tacoma with them. And at first I always called them like my brother and sister. And then I just, like, over time, I mean, everyone who met us just assumed they were my parents because they're older, like, than the siblings would be. But
Yeah.
just naturally, it turned into that. And yeah, naturally, I remember one day for Mother's Day, I went out with my mom now, but at that point, she wasn't my mom legally yet. And I remember like just looking at her and thinking like, man, I wish she was actually my mom. And it's like, but naturally, those conversations came up, and all that took place.
Wow. Didn't you say that it was really hard for you too to think of, like, really even want to use that name, mom and dad, for anybody?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I didn't ever even grow up calling like my birth parents that. They actually told me like, don't call us that. Like, you call us by our first names. And so
Oh, wow.
it was like, yeah, I never used those words. And with my foster parents, part of why things got weird is because I think there was a lot of bitterness, because it's like they expected me to call them that as soon as I moved in, and I never did, and ended up calling them that. And so it's like that was an expectation, which it should have not have been there. And so those two words were very distorted for me, and
Oh,
just like
yeah.
family in general. But yeah, saying like mom and dad, it's like I would say all the time to people, I never want to call anyone that. And it's like I made this confession all the time. So it's like now I can say them, and I'm still learning how to use them, and to feel like it's a process. It's like, I guess, like
Yeah.
a child who's never done it. And because I've had bad experiences surrounding those words, but
Right.
it's amazing, like, God's redeeming that. And I'm so glad I get to spend the rest of my life now saying those words in like the true way that God meant for them to be used.
That's so awesome. Well, and for our listeners, maybe they're starting to add up going, wait, if she was 17 when she first went in, like, how old was she when because you actually got adopted as a 26-year-old,
Yes. Yeah.
which is so cool. And some people might not even realize that's a thing, that can be a
Yeah.
thing.
I didn't.
How did that happen? Like, how did that kind of decision become made?
So it's actually kind of funny. My parents and we had a friend or we have a friend who's like around my age. And I remember her getting really close with my parents. And I will just be honest, I was feeling very insecure. And I remember thinking, because to me, I feel like deep relationship, it took so much effort for me to cultivate with anyone, just because of having broken trust. And I
Sure.
remember thinking, wow, this girl like feels like she acts so close to my parents, but they barely know her. And so does that mean that, I guess it was more of, I mean, it definitely was a me personal issue. I just thought, does that mean that anyone can just do that with them? Like, that I can just be that easily, not that they were replacing me, but to me,
Sure.
that's how, because of insecurity, I did not have secure connections. And it's not because of them. It's just truly was my own issue. And so I remember one day I was driving with my mom to Portland for an appointment, and I said to her, I had mentioned, our friend, and I just started crying, and she could tell I was feeling super insecure. And I just said, I don't get how this person, like, you barely know them, and it's almost like they're on the same level as me. And then, my mom was like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no levels. Like, we just, we're close with everyone. Like, we're pastors. Like, unless God calls us to do life, it's community. There's always going to be more people, but they're like, you're never going to be replaced. Like, you are who you are. You are a family. Like, and so she was affirming me, but to me, that wasn't even like enough, I guess. And so, I actually 2 years prior to that, so in 2017, I got my last name changed to theirs. So I took like
Okay.
my mom and my dad's like hyphenated last name. So she even brought that up. She's like, you have our last name. Like, this person doesn't. Like, and it really was just like another friend of ours. But to me, I just got insecure. And so she said, you have our last name. Like, you're a part of our tribe. Like, I think she was trying to figure out like what more, not in a bad way, but it's like what more, like,
Yeah.
what do you need us to do to show you? And so I said, yeah, I know I have your last name, but like, I don't know. I just feel like it's like I can be so easily replaced, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember her just saying like, well, like, do you want us to adopt you? Like, we would adopt you like tomorrow. And I remember hearing her say those words, and I just like, I was driving, and I just like was trying to figure out how I could keep driving. Cause it's like, I feel like those are the words I've always wanted to hear, but I never expressed that to them. I actually expressed the opposite because I was always trying to hide my emotions and my desire to be adopted. People would say, oh, are Adam and Janelle your parents? And inside, I loved hearing that, but it also hurt me because I thought that's never going to happen. So I hate when people say that. And so I would tell them, someone just thought you guys were my parents. It's so annoying when people think that. But really, I was just I think I was trying to protect myself and make myself feel
Yeah,
like.
sure.
And so if for them, they would have had no idea because they really thought I just like didn't ever want that. And so they in hindsight, they always say like they knew that one day that God was going to open the door for this, but they're like, we never wanted to bring it into our own desires or our own timing. Like, we wanted God to be the one and for you to be the one to voice it. But since the beginning, they've always said, we are willing to be whoever you want us to be in your life, but just know that we'll always be there. And so when she said that day, I was like, wait, really? And I just was like, oh my gosh, like, I wanted it to happen like that day. I was like, how do we do this? Like, I don't even know if adults can be adopted. And then my dad was on a business trip in Vegas, but she's like, actually, he has looked up information about this for years, like probably for 4 years. He knows because we live in Oregon together. She's like, he knows the process in Oregon and he knows it in Washington. And to me, I kind of was just like, oh my goodness. So you guys have had this in your heart and carried it for that many years without like overstepping bounds or just, yeah, it was amazing. And so the process is really simple. And then we ended up, luckily, like the court only does adult adoptions or adoptions in general on Fridays. And it ended up being 2 years to the date of when my last name was changed in 2019. So it
Really?
was so cool. And it was the best court experience of my life
Yeah,
for
you got to tell us
sure.
about that. I actually saw the video on your
Oh,
Instagram.
fun.
It was so cool, but tell us about it.
Yeah, it was, I had hated going to court, of course, for all my foster care
Oh,
experience.
sure.
It was so traumatic and like a lot of really close, like even safety calls whenever I had to go to court. And so this experience was, they do it in order of ages. I remember, it sounds weird, but I remember showing up to the court that day, and it's a juvenile hall in Tacoma, and seeing a bunch of kids, and just everyone was so happy, so excited. I did see a few actually like teenagers, but I don't think anyone was like an adult. And so we got there, we had like my godmother flew in from Vegas. We had like family from out of town, just so fun. So many people that we loved were there, and people from all different parts of our stories, which was also very cool. And so, they're like, okay, we go in age order. So you're going to be the last one. So it took a few hours. So we got to we went out and got coffee, came back, got called in, and it was just the judge and everything. I was shocked at the emotion in the room from the people who didn't even know us. And to me, it was like the day I had dreamed of that I never thought would happen. So it felt so surreal. And when we filled out the paperwork, we had talked about why in Washington, the person being adopted is who I declare who my parents are versus them
Interesting.
declaring who their child is, which to me, I felt like was really cool because it's like I had the power of choice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it felt really it felt really like redeeming. And so the judge had shared that he had read our papers, and he like got super emotional. And I think everyone in the room was kind of taken aback by it because he choked up and he's like, I want to thank you guys for letting me end my week with you. And those are words like that I'll never forget, because to me, I was like such an honor for me to be in that courtroom. It was an honor that adult adoption is even a thing, because,
Yeah.
people could say it's just a piece of paper. But to me, someone who's never had permanency, it's not just a piece of paper. It's a promise, a promise that can't be broken. It's a covenant. And so
Yeah.
to me, it meant the world to have that legally, like, we're declaring this. And then, he asked us to share a bit. And my mom, I think you saw in the video, she like thanked them for adult adoption
Yes.
being a thing, and
Yes.
talking about aging out and still having that desire for belonging. It doesn't end when you age out. And, different family members and loved ones shared just their words about it all. And then at the end, the judge was like, well, like he said, oh, this is a happy day. And he kind of was like giggling. He's like, I don't know if it's thanks to the system or because of it, but truly it was and still is a happy day. And I don't, yeah, like it's something that I would have never imagined being adopted out after I aged out, because it didn't happen for me while I
Yeah.
was in foster care. So I thought, what are the odds, And so it's like, this God writes the most beautiful stories, and
Yes.
it just continually reminds me of how his heart is always for family, and always for the lonely to be placed in families, and for seats to be added to tables, and just his father's heart is just so big and beyond what we can imagine.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Well, Annie, your story it's powerful, and it does draw us closer to the heart of God. And that's what he wants, for all of us, that our stories draw people closer and ourselves closer to him, because that's where we find ultimate belonging, isn't it?
Yes.
I would love it if you would just speak more to our listeners about the importance of adoption, especially for our aged out youth and our older teens. Help us better understand what it's like to be an adult living life alone, not belonging to someone. Like, why does the church need to care about this?
I would say for sure, not having somewhere to go. Like, you hear often people will use this when I talk about age out, like not having somewhere to go on holidays, on birthdays. And it could be easy to hear it just like a traditional line, but something like that, it causes not just holidays to be hard, but just daily reality. Just that knowing in the back of your mind, like in any given moment, oh, I don't know who I have to call. Like, say this happens, say that happens. And it makes all the difference in the world, even if one caring adult steps up for every person who's aged out. One caring adult who's there, who the youth knows, like, oh, I can call this person if I need help filling out tax papers, if I need help applying for a job, if, for a guy, I don't know how to tie a tie, I don't know what to wear
Yeah.
to a job interview. Having that security of knowing that there's someone who's there for you, and somebody who's advocating for you, someone who's cheering you on, makes all the difference in the world. And a lot of times people will ask, like, how do I find like an adult or a teen or someone who's age out to adopt? And I don't have the answer for that, because like in my story, like, God orchestrated these people coming into my life. I didn't like go, on the internet
Yeah.
and say I'm open, because a lot of people, I think that, which I love that their heart is in that place, but I'm like, I don't have answers for that, but I do have answers for, I feel like every church or every person probably does know someone who's aged out of foster care, or someone who's involved in that. And so to me, it's like, it doesn't even have to look like adopting them. It could look like letting them know they have an open invite to your home at any time. It could
Yeah.
be taking a young lady out to get her nails done. It could be like, for me, I feel like the ways that people have shown up throughout my whole foster care journey, even in the smallest, what may seem like a really small way to them, has been so impactful in my life, because it's not just going and doing things that speaks volumes. It's just being able to see that someone cares, and that someone notices you, and that you're not on your own.
Yeah.
And like we all know, like the "it takes a village" phrase, but that's like a complete reality that I've lived out. It really does take a village, and like that village makes all the difference for sure.
That's so important to hear. I have one more question for you. And I want you to share your heart with your parents. I want you to imagine they're right here, sitting across the table from you. Like, what do they mean to you?
I always say this to them, but I'm like, I don't even have the words to say. I, I, yeah, I thank them for their yes on a daily basis. They say yes to me even like on the hardest days as an adult, like learning how to be a daughter is not easy, even when it, like, I always say God chose a perfect parent for me. And in my eyes, like, they really are like just the perfect ones for me. But to me, like, I'm still healing, I'm still growing. And so even the days where it seems like speaks louder than my reality, or days where, I'm still learning to accept it, they say yes to me through it all. They walk with me through it all. They have so much grace and patience. And yeah, they honestly, I always tell them that they're my God dream come true, because they have said yes to me since the moment they met me, and that yes has never lessened. It's only grown, and they've taught me what unconditional love looks like. They've taught me to love myself again. Like, they truly love me back to life, and that's something that I have, learning to love myself has been a process, but when I look at how they love me, it teaches me about not only like what love should look like, but what God's heart looks like. They are like Jesus in the flesh to me, for sure.
Wow. They've loved you back to life. That's really powerful and beautiful. And you're right, it's God's heart. That's awesome. Well, Annie, it's been a absolute privilege to sit with you and hear from you and talk with you and just continue on. God has such beautiful things ahead for you still. And so thank you for being here and for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Well, I hope today's episode was an encouragement to you wherever you are on this foster care journey. Now, we want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, we have a ton of great content for you over at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time.